Welcome to Famous People, English Stories. Ready to level up your English? Here we learn through stories slow, clear, and fun. Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey.
Introduction. In this story, we follow Jake's journey as he transforms his daily routine into something that not only helps him stay productive but also allows him to grow and adapt through life's unexpected twists. From morning clarity to embracing flexibility, Jake discovers how a well-crafted routine can shape his success, happiness, and long-term growth. Ready to see how routines can change your life too? Let's dive in. Chapter 1: The Morning Rush. It was 6:30 in the morning when Jake's alarm clock buzzed like a swarm of bees. He groaned, rolled over, and smacked the snooze button like it had personally offended him. 10 more minutes, he thought. But of course, 10 minutes became 20, and by the time he finally opened his eyes again, it was 6:50. "Oh no," Jake muttered, rubbing his eyes. Not again. He sat up, stretched his arms over his head, and yawned so wide it could have scared a bear. The sun was peeking through his curtains, and the birds were chirping cheerfully outside his window. Jake didn't feel cheerful at all. He was already late for his morning run. "I always say I'm going to wake up early and run. But do I?" "Nope," he mumbled to himself. Still, he forced himself out of bed. First stop, the bathroom. He brushed his teeth with one hand while scrolling through his phone with the other, checking messages and the weather. Partly cloudy today. Not bad. After a quick shower, Jake threw on some workout clothes. As he laced up his sneakers, he said to himself, "All right, I'm running even if it's just 15 minutes." Out on the street, the world was slowly waking up. A woman was walking her dog, a man was jogging with headphones on, and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery made Jake's stomach growl. "I should have eaten something," he said, half jogging, half regretting every step. After a short, out-of-breath run, Jake returned home, panting. "Well, that was something," he said with a grin. Back inside, he poured himself a glass of cold water and sat at the kitchen table, catching his breath. Then it was time for his real morning routine, breakfast. Jake made a quick bowl of oatmeal, added a spoon of peanut butter, sliced a banana, and topped it all with cinnamon. "Breakfast of champions," he joked. As he ate, he checked his to-do list for the day. Meetings, emails, a video call at 11, and a deadline by 3 p.m. After eating, he washed his bowl, made a cup of coffee, and headed to his tiny home office, a desk squeezed between a bookshelf and the window. He logged into his work chat, still in sweatpants, hair messy, but coffee in hand. "Good morning, team," he typed. The messages rolled in fast. "Morning, Jake. Did you see the boss's email? Big client call today." Jake took a sip of coffee inside. "Here we go," he whispered. But he wasn't complaining. Truth be told, he liked the structure of the mornings, even if they always started a bit chaotically. As the clock ticked past 9, Jake was already deep into emails, replying, organizing, forwarding. His day had officially begun. Chapter 2: Midday Madness. By 11 a.m., Jake was in full work mode. His laptop screen was a battlefield of open tabs, emails, spreadsheets, video calls, and at least 3 documents he had meant to finish last week. Ping. A message popped up from his manager. "Can we chat for 5 minutes before the client call?" Jake blinked. Of course, he typed, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He took a quick look in the mirror on the wall behind his desk. His hair was still doing its own thing. He flattened it with his hands and changed into a casual button-down shirt, still wearing sweatpants, of course. Business on top, comfort on the bottom. The classic work-from-home look. As he waited for the Zoom call to start, he glanced at the clock. Lunch is gonna have to wait, he sighed. The video call rang. Jake took a deep breath and clicked join. His manager appeared, smiling. "Hey, Jake. Just wanted to go over a couple things before we jump in with the client." Jake nodded. "Sure, I've got the notes here." They went through a few key points, shared a couple of laughs, and 5 minutes turned into 15. Then it was time for the big client call. Jake straightened up in his chair. The client joined. Everyone smiled politely. The usual small talk began. "How's the weather on your side?" "Oh, it's been raining for days here." "Same here. Can't wait for summer." Jake listened closely, nodding, jumping in when needed. He used all the usual business phrases. "I totally understand where you're coming from." "That's a great question. Let me walk you through it." "Let's circle back to that in a moment." He felt himself slipping into professional English mode, a voice slightly more polished, a little more careful, yet still friendly. The call lasted just under an hour. As it ended, Jake leaned back in his chair and stretched. "One down, 2 more to go," he muttered. His stomach growled. Okay. I get it. Time for lunch." Jake shuffled into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and stared at its contents like they might speak to him. Half a pizza from last night. Some salad greens. A yogurt. Eggs. He grabbed the eggs and started making an omelet. As he chopped up some onions and peppers, he said aloud, "I really need to get better at meal prepping." The smell of frying vegetables filled the air. He added cheese, folded the omelet like a pro, and sat down to eat. This was his favorite part of the day, not the food, but the pause. The quiet. A moment to breathe before diving back in. He scrolled through social media while chewing, liking a friend's vacation photo, chuckling at a meme, and shaking his head at some random drama he didn't care about. After eating, he washed his plate and stood at the sink for a moment, just staring out the window. Across the street, a couple of kids were riding bikes. A cat was napping on a balcony. Someone was watering plants. "Looks peaceful out there," he said quietly. Then, the spell broke. Another ping. Another message. Back to the desk. Back to the screen. By 1:30, Jake was knee-deep in editing a proposal. His focus flickered, but he pushed through. Every few minutes, he found himself saying things like, "Where did I save that file? Why won't this document load? Oh no, don't freeze now." He took another coffee break. This time, iced coffee. Something about the clink of ice cubes in a glass made him feel alive again. Then, just as he was about to take his first sip, ring. Another call. He sighed, smiled at the irony, and answered with his cheerful hello. This was just another day in the life. And honestly, he kind of liked it. Chapter 3: The Evening Slowdown. The clock ticked past 4 p.m. and Jake's brain was starting to fog up. His eyes were dry from staring at the screen, and his fingers were tired of typing. The last meeting of the day had just ended, and the silence that followed was almost too quiet. He leaned back in his chair and let out a long sigh. "That's enough meetings for one lifetime," he said to no one in particular. Outside, the sunlight had softened into a golden hue. His tiny home office glowed with warmth, and the shadows on the wall stretched lazily across the room. It was that in-between time, the part of the day when everything started to slow down. Jake stood up and stretched again. His back cracked like popcorn. "Oof. I need to move more," he said, rubbing his shoulders. He walked into the living room and flopped onto the couch, scrolling aimlessly on his phone. A few texts from friends had come in. "Drinks Friday? You watching the game tonight? Don't forget about Mom's birthday." Jake smiled at the last one. "Right. Gotta call her later." He tossed the phone aside and just sat there for a while, staring at the ceiling, letting his mind drift. Eventually, he stood up and decided to clean up a little. The dishes in the sink weren't going to wash themselves. He turned on some music, lo-fi beats, and let the rhythm carry him through the motions: rinse, scrub, rinse, dry. There was something calming about cleaning, even if it wasn't exciting. Afterward, he lit a candle and opened the window to let in the cool evening air. It smelled like grass and distant barbecue. Someone in the neighborhood was grilling. Jake changed into comfy clothes and pulled a hoodie over his head. He looked at the clock. 5:45 p.m. Not too late for a walk, he thought. He grabbed his keys and stepped outside. The streets were quieter now, with a few joggers and dog walkers here and there. The sky was painted in soft orange and pink. Birds fluttered across rooftops. Kids were riding scooters, and an old man was watering his garden. Jake breathed in deep and exhaled slowly. "This is nice," he said out loud. As he walked, he thought about the day, what he got done, what he didn't, and what he was proud of. He thought about work, sure, but also about the little things: that omelet he made, the way he actually got some exercise, the fact that he remembered to reply to his friend's message. "Small wins," he whispered with a smirk. By the time he got back home, it was nearly 7 o'clock. He flicked on the lights, changed into pajama pants, and stood in front of the fridge again. Dinner. This time he decided on something simple: pasta. He boiled water, threw in the noodles, and made a quick sauce with garlic, olive oil, and cherry tomatoes. Easy, satisfying, and fast. He ate in front of the TV, watching a comedy show he'd seen a dozen times already. He wasn't really watching it, more like letting it play in the background while his mind wandered. After dinner, he did the dishes again, wiped down the counters, and turned off the kitchen light. The apartment felt peaceful, almost like it was exhaling with him. Back in the living room, he curled up with a blanket and opened a book he'd been meaning to finish for weeks. He only made it through a few pages before his eyes started to close. "I'll finish it tomorrow," he mumbled, placing the book on the coffee table. The day was coming to a quiet close. He turned off the TV, dimmed the lights, and headed to the bathroom. As he brushed his teeth, he looked at his reflection and gave a sleepy smile. "Not bad, Jake. You made it through another one." He climbed into bed, pulled the covers up, and grabbed his phone one last time to set his alarm. 6:30 a.m. "Maybe tomorrow I won't hit snooze," he said, already knowing he probably would. With that, he turned off the lamp. The room went dark. The day was over. And tomorrow? It would all begin again. Chapter 4, Weekend Twist, Routines with Friends. It was Saturday morning, and for once, Jake didn't wake up to the angry buzz of his alarm. No snooze button. No rush. Just sunlight creeping through the curtains and the gentle hum of the world outside. He rolled over, checked the time, 9:12 a.m., and smiled. No meetings. No emails. Just vibes. He stretched lazily and lay in bed for a few more minutes, scrolling through his phone. Social media was full of pancakes, hiking trails, weekend selfies, and beach shots. He liked a few photos, laughed at a dog video, and replied definitely to a group chat message about brunch. 11:30 at Café Luna? I'm in, Jake typed. Don't let me be the first one there again. He got up slowly, enjoying the pace. There was no rush to beat the clock. He padded into the kitchen barefoot, started the kettle for tea, and threw 2 slices of bread into the toaster. It was the kind of morning where everything moved in slow motion, but in a good way. As he spread butter and jam on toast, he said to himself, "This is the life." After breakfast and a quick shower, he got dressed in jeans, a plain white tee, and sneakers. Simple. Comfortable. On his way to the cafe, he passed through the park, where families were out walking, kids were chasing pigeons, and joggers nodded politely as they passed by. Jake plugged in his earbuds and let his weekend playlist carry him through the short walk. When he arrived at Café Luna, the place was already buzzing. Laughter, clinking cups, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. The host recognized him and waved. "Your friends are outside," she said with a smile. Jake stepped out to the patio and spotted them right away, Ella, Mark, and Danny, sitting around a table already halfway through their first round of drinks. "There he is," Ella called out. "Mr. Always on time." Jake grinned as he sat down. "Told you not to make me the first one here." Mark raised his iced latte. "To lazy Saturdays." Everyone clinked their glasses together. It was a familiar ritual, their weekend reset. They ordered waffles, eggs Benedict, avocado toast, extra avocado, please, Danny added like she always did. And settled into easy conversation. They talked about their week, complained about work, joked about their old college days, and made fun of each other in that affectionate way only close friends can. "Jake," Ella said, sipping her cappuccino, "do you ever actually stick to your morning run plan?" Jake laughed. "Sometimes. Like, once a month." The table burst into laughter. Brunch rolled on for nearly 2 hours. Time didn't matter. No one checked their watches. No one was in a hurry. That was the magic of Saturday. After they paid, the group wandered through the weekend market nearby. Stalls selling handmade jewelry, scented candles, homemade pastries, and fresh flowers lined the street. Musicians played mellow tunes on the sidewalk, and the scent of roasted almonds floated through the air. Jake stopped to buy a small potted plant. "For your desk?" Mark asked. "Yeah," Jake replied. "Might help it feel less like a prison." They all laughed again. Around 3 p.m. they started to drift apart, saying their goodbyes with hugs and lazy waves. "Same time next week?" Danny asked. Absolutely, Ella replied. But someone else is buying the coffee next time. Jake headed home with the plant in one hand and a to-go iced tea in the other. He felt light. Not just from the food and the fresh air, but from the people, the laughter, the rhythm of friendship. Back at his apartment, he put the plant on his desk, took a photo of it, and sent it to the group chat. Jake, my new coworker. Ella, it already looks more productive than you. Mark, that plant has potential. He laughed, tossed the phone on the couch, and flopped down beside it. It had been a good day, not eventful, not wild, but solid. Real. The kind of day that reminded him life didn't always have to be exciting to feel full. He looked out the window at the fading afternoon sun and let himself relax. No alarms tomorrow, no big plans. Just another slow, steady step in the rhythm of life. Weekend routines, he said aloud, I could get used to this. And with that, Jake closed his eyes for a quick nap, because on Saturdays, even naps are part of the plan. Chapter 5, Unexpected Monday, Breaking the Routine. Monday mornings usually followed a script. Wake up late, skip the run, drink too much coffee, and spend half the day trying to feel human again. But this Monday was different. Jake woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing non-stop. He groaned, reached over, and squinted at the screen. It was only 6:20 a.m. 8 missed calls. 14 messages. His heart jumped. That's never a good sign. The messages were from his coworker Sam, his team lead, and even the company group chat. Sam, Jake, are you up? Emergency. Team lead, need you online ASAP. Client project failed to upload. Another coworker, server crashed last night. Can you check it out? Jake sat straight up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Great. Monday's got jokes. He swung out of bed, skipped everything. No teeth brushing, no coffee, not even a glance in the mirror, and ran straight to his laptop. His hoodie was inside out, but that was the least of his concerns. He clicked furiously through folders, checked logs, called Sam, then the IT guy, then Sam again. No. I did send the file Friday. I swear. Jake, it's not in the system. I have the timestamp. Look, I'll resend it now. For the next 2 hours, Jake was in digital firefighter mode. Eyes darting across the screen, fingers flying over the keyboard. His coffee went cold. His phone buzzed non-stop. Finally, around 9:45 a.m., the issue was fixed. The client got the files. The panic died down. Everyone breathed again. Jake leaned back in his chair and let out a long, dramatic exhale. Disaster averted. He looked down at himself. Sweatpants. Slippers. Hoodie half-zipped. His hair looked like he'd been wrestling in his sleep. This is not how champions look, he muttered. He stood up, went to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on his face. As he dried off, he chuckled. Well, at least I'm awake now. By 10:30, he was finally settling into the day, but the usual routine was wrecked. His to-do list? Forgotten. His schedule? A mess. The Monday he thought he had planned was gone. I guess routines don't always go to plan, he said aloud. So, he improvised. He made a quick breakfast, just toast and eggs, and sat on the couch to regroup. His phone buzzed again. "Ella, you okay?" Saw the panic in the chat. Thought about sending donuts as emotional support. Jake replied. "Donuts would have saved my soul tbh." After breakfast, he took a slow walk around the block. He needed to reset. The breeze helped. The sun was bright but not too hot. The neighborhood was quiet again. He watched a kid try to balance on a scooter. A dog barked at a butterfly. A woman jogged past with earbuds in, mouthing the lyrics to whatever song kept her moving. It was all peaceful. A strange contrast to his chaotic morning. Back home, Jake opened his laptop again, this time calmly. He lit a candle, lavender, his favorite, and put on soft instrumental music. It wasn't his usual work vibe, but it helped. He began catching up on emails. Responding with a bit more patience. Slower. Calmer. By lunchtime, he had rebalanced. He made a grilled cheese, watched a 10-minute travel vlog, and even smiled. Not everything had to be perfect. Not every Monday needed to run like clockwork. He pulled out a notebook and jotted down. Today's lesson. Sometimes you don't follow the routine. Sometimes the routine follows you. At 3 p.m., he joined a team check-in. Everyone looked as tired as he felt. "Rough morning?" Jake asked. "You could say that," Sam replied with a weak laugh. "Should we all just take tomorrow off and pretend today didn't happen?" someone joked. Everyone laughed. That helped. By the end of the day, Jake had handled what needed to be handled. Nothing extra. No heroic productivity. Just enough. As he shut his laptop at 6 o'clock, he stretched and whispered to himself, "You survived. That's good enough." Dinner that night was takeout, Thai noodles, extra spicy. Comfort food for a brain that had been pushed to its limit. He watched an episode of a cooking show, didn't check his phone, didn't worry about the next day. When he got into bed, he didn't set an alarm. "I'll start fresh tomorrow," he whispered. Because even the most disciplined routines need a break. And even the most ordinary Mondays can surprise you. Chapter 6: Conversations That Stick, How We Talk About Our Day. Jake woke up to a familiar sound, the quiet hum of his phone buzzing. He stretched, rubbed his eyes, and saw that it was already 8:15 a.m. Not bad, he thought. He didn't have to rush. Jake rolled out of bed and, like every morning, checked his phone. A few messages from his friends, some emails, and a reminder about his dentist appointment. As usual, he ignored the dentist appointment reminder. That could be dealt with later. As he made his way to the kitchen, he started thinking about the conversations he'd had recently, those little chats with friends and family that had stuck with him. It wasn't just about how people spoke, but about how they talked about their daily lives. Everyone had their own routine, but it was the stories, the small details that made each one feel unique. Today was going to be different. Jake decided that he would take the time to really reflect on the conversations he had with the people in his life, maybe even understand more about himself in the process. He sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, listening to the soft sizzle of the toaster in the background. He was about to send a text to Danny when his phone rang. It was Mark. "Hey, man." Jake answered. "Hey, Jake, what's up?" Mark said, his voice chipper as always. "Just wanted to check in. How's the Monday going?" Jake laughed. "It's been interesting," he replied. "You know, the usual routine chaos. I had a big client thing go sideways this morning." "Ah, the Monday special," Mark said knowingly. "Same here. I was late to a meeting because I couldn't find my shoes." "The little things, right?" Jake chuckled. "Yeah, exactly. Funny how it's always the small stuff that gets to you." Mark agreed. "So, what did you do about it?" "The client thing, I mean." "Well," Jake said, "I just took a deep breath and handled it. In the end, everything worked out, but it was one of those mornings where you feel like you're running a marathon without warming up." "I hear that," Mark said, his voice dropping a bit. "Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in this loop, you know? Every day, same stuff. It's all routine, wake up, work, eat, sleep. Lately, it feels like I'm doing all the right things but still missing something." Jake took a moment to think about that. He definitely felt the same way before. Like he was moving through the motions but not really living in the moment. "Yeah, I get it," Jake replied. "I think sometimes we forget to check in with ourselves, right? Like, we get so caught up in the tasks that we forget to talk about how the day feels." Mark was silent for a moment. "You mean, talk about the day, not just, well, what we did?" "Exactly," Jake said. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately, how we talk about our days. It's like when we chat about our routines with people, it's never just about what we did. It's about how those small things add up, how they shape us. Like when we say, 'I'm so tired today,' it's not just because we worked, it's because of the way we worked. It's the emotional part of it." "Ah, I see what you mean," Mark said, now sounding intrigued. "So, like, how we talk about our stress, our wins, our little victories." "Exactly," Jake said, feeling a spark of excitement. "Like, the other day I was talking to Ella about my morning routine. It wasn't just I wake up, I make coffee, I work. It was more like I wake up, feel like I've got a million things to do, but then I take a second to breathe, and it makes everything easier. You know?" Mark laughed. "I like that. Makes it sound like you've got it together." Jake smirked. "Trust me, I don't. But I try to find moments to ground myself. I think that's the key to surviving the routine without losing your mind." "That makes sense," Mark said thoughtfully. "It's funny, though. Sometimes I feel like everyone else has this magical routine that's so organized and perfect. But when I stop and listen to their stories, I realize we're all just trying to make it through the day, one step at a time." "You're right," Jake said, grinning. "No one's routine is perfect, even though we all pretend it is. But when we share those imperfections, it helps us connect. It's like we're all just doing our best, and that's enough." Mark paused, then added, "Yeah, I think I needed to hear that today." Jake laughed. "Glad I could be your reminder. But hey, speaking of routines, how's your Saturday routine going? Still going for that morning walk?" Mark groaned. "Yeah, about that. I set an alarm for 7 a.m. on Saturday, and I slept right through it. I guess I'll try again next week." Jake chuckled. "No pressure. We're all figuring it out. As the conversation shifted to other topics, Jake realized something. It wasn't just the big moments of his day that mattered, it was the conversations about the little things, the routines, the struggles, the victories. When we talk about our daily lives, we give meaning to the small moments, and in turn, those moments start to shape us. That evening, as Jake sat on his couch, he reflected on the talk with Mark. He'd always thought that routines were just something to get through. But now, he saw them as stories we live every day and share with the people we care about. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes life feel a little more connected. He smiled and pulled out his phone to send a message to Danny. "Hey, let's talk about our routines sometime this week. I think it's more than just the stuff we do." He hit send and leaned back, feeling a little more at peace with the way his days unfolded. Chapter 7: Finding Balance: How to Keep Your Routine Fresh. The sun was setting as Jake sat at his desk, looking out the window at the city streets below. Another day was coming to a close, and he was feeling oddly content. Sure, he had gotten through his list of tasks, but more importantly, he had found a way to slow down and enjoy the little things. There was no major crisis today, no frantic race to meet deadlines. It was just a steady, smooth flow of productivity. But deep down, Jake knew he needed something more. The past few weeks had been about stabilizing his routine, and he felt good about that. However, part of him worried that his days were starting to feel too predictable. Too safe. Too routine. Maybe it's time for something new, Jake said to himself, leaning back in his chair. I've been doing the same things, the same way, for too long. Maybe it's time to shake it up a bit. He opened his calendar, reviewing the week ahead. Meetings, client work, errands, emails, just the usual stuff. It all looked like the same pattern. The same rhythm. Sure, it worked, but it lacked that spark that made him excited to start each day. Jake needed to find a way to inject some fun into his routine. As he thought about it, his phone buzzed. It was Danny. "Danny, let's grab coffee tomorrow morning? I need a break from my usual routine." Jake smiled. Perfect timing. "Jake, sounds good. Let's meet at 9. "Danny, great. I'll need your advice on my workout routine. I'm bored with it, but I don't know where to start." Jake raised an eyebrow. Workouts were a solid part of his morning routine. He did a quick 20-minute bodyweight session every day. But Danny was right. Sometimes it was hard to keep things interesting. "I've been stuck in a bit of a routine rut too," Jake admitted aloud. "Maybe we can help each other." He thought back to what he had been reading about the importance of change. How to keep a routine fresh without throwing it completely off balance. Adding new elements to the mix. Changing things up bit by bit to make every day feel a little more exciting. Jake jotted down a quick note on his notepad. Ways to refresh a routine. Start small, add one new habit or tweak an existing one. Switch up the time, do the same activities at different times of day. Learn something new, a new skill, hobby, or interest. Change the scenery, work from a different location, or go for a walk somewhere new. Mix social activities into your routine, coffee with a friend, a workout partner, etc. Jake liked the simplicity of these ideas. Nothing drastic, but enough to keep things interesting. The next morning, Jake met Danny at the cafe. They found a small table in the corner, sipping their coffees in comfortable silence before diving into conversation. "So, what's this workout routine crisis about?" Jake asked, taking a sip of his cappuccino. Danny rolled her eyes, letting out a dramatic sigh. "I've been doing the same routine for months. Squats, lunges, push-ups. But it's getting boring. I just can't bring myself to do it anymore. It feels like a chore." Jake thought about his own workouts. He had the same routine every morning, just a quick set of exercises, but he'd changed things up recently by doing his stretches in the park or going for an early jog instead of just sticking to the living room floor. "I get that," Jake said. "I used to get bored with my workout too. But then I started switching it up. Sometimes I'll go for a walk or do some yoga instead. Keeps it fresh." Danny looked intrigued. "Yoga? Never tried that. I thought it was all about balance and stretching." "Exactly," Jake replied. "It's actually really relaxing, and it helps with flexibility. And if I'm not in the mood to hit weights, I'll just do a session to reset my mind. Maybe try mixing in something like that? Or, if you're into it, try a dance class. Something fun." Danny raised an eyebrow. "Dance class? I don't know if I'm ready for that." Jake chuckled. "Hey, it's worth a try. Plus, it's a good way to break the monotony." "True," Danny said. "I'll think about it. What about you? How's your routine?" Jake paused. "Well, honestly, I've been trying to add a little more variety myself. I started working from different spots at home. The kitchen, the balcony, sometimes just sitting by the window makes a huge difference. I also started reading more in the evenings, not just watching TV. It's nice to wind down with something different." "That sounds nice," Danny said thoughtfully. "I could try something like that. A change of scenery might do me good." They sat in silence for a moment, both thinking about their routines and how easy it was to fall into a repetitive cycle. It was comforting, but also limiting. Like living in the same movie every day, eventually, you wanted a plot twist. "So, let's make a pact," Jake said, smiling. "Let's keep each other accountable. We'll try something new once a week. Could be a new workout, a new hobby, a new place to hang out, whatever. Just something that keeps us from getting stuck." Danny's eyes lit up. "I like that idea. Okay, I'm in." After they finished their coffees, they agreed to check in every week about what they'd tried. It was a small step, but both of them knew that changing up their routines, even in little ways, would help them feel more energized and engaged in their lives. As Jake left the cafe, he felt a lightness in his step. He was already thinking about the new things he could add to his days. It wasn't about changing everything, but about making enough adjustments to keep things fresh, so life didn't feel so predictable. Jake smiled to himself as he walked back home. A routine was a tool, but creativity was the key to unlocking it. "Here's to finding balance," Jake said aloud. One step at a time. Chapter 8: The Power of Reflection, Looking Back to Move Forward. Jake sat at his desk, staring at the blank screen in front of him. The quiet hum of the city was the only sound in the room as the evening light filtered through the blinds. It had been a few weeks since he and Danny had agreed to mix up their routines. Some days had been harder than others, but overall, he felt different. Better, even. more alive in his own life. He had kept his promise. He tried something new each week, small things that added variety without throwing his routine completely out of whack. And it worked. Some changes had been small and simple, swapping his usual cup of coffee for green tea in the mornings, working from a new corner of his apartment, or taking 15-minute walks during lunch instead of sitting at his desk. Others were more significant, like signing up for a weekend cooking class or taking a different route home from work just for the fun of it. It wasn't a massive transformation, but the changes had added a layer of excitement to his daily life. His routines felt less like a series of tasks to get through and more like a foundation he could build on. Now, it was time to reflect. Jake believed in the power of reflection, the ability to look back on where you've been, understand what's worked, and figure out how to move forward. So, after finishing up his work for the day, he opened his notebook and started writing. What's worked? Switching up my workspace, moving around my apartment to work in different spots really made a difference. It helped me feel less stuck and made my tasks feel a little more exciting. The fresh air on the balcony, the natural light in the living room, these things added energy to my day. Incorporating breaks, I've started taking real breaks, no phone, no laptop. Just walking outside or stretching. It's helped me feel more focused and less stressed. Learning new things. The cooking class was a highlight. I thought I'd be terrible at it, but it was fun to try something new and challenging. Plus, I've cooked a lot more meals at home since then. Jake paused, reading over the list. He could see the changes had made a difference. But there was something more he wanted to add, something he hadn't really realized until he reflected on it. What I need to focus on. Consistency with the new habits. I'm good at trying new things, but I sometimes drop them after a few weeks. I need to keep that initial excitement going and make sure these changes become regular parts of my routine. Embracing the boring moments. I've learned that it's okay to have quiet, uneventful days. They don't always need to be packed with activity or excitement. Sometimes, I just need to let my routine be what it is. Connecting with others. I want to spend more time connecting with people. Whether that's friends, family, or new people I meet. These connections have added so much meaning to my routines and made the days feel fuller. Jake paused, his pen hovering above the paper. There it was. The biggest realization. The most valuable takeaway from all of this, his routines weren't just about him. They were about how they connected him to the world around him, his friends, his family, and even the small, everyday moments that seemed unimportant at first but ended up being the most meaningful. I've been too focused on what I need to do, he said aloud. Maybe it's time to think more about what we do. It was true. Over the past few weeks, the times he felt the most energized weren't just when he was knocking out his own tasks, but when he was sharing experiences with others. Danny, Mark, and even his coworkers, they all played a part in making his routine feel more dynamic. Whether it was sharing a coffee, reflecting on a workout, or talking about a project, those moments of connection were what made the daily grind feel worthwhile. Jake closed the notebook and leaned back in his chair. He felt a sense of peace settle over him. It was like he had been walking on autopilot for so long, just going through the motions of work, sleep, and routines, but now he was truly present. He wasn't just surviving his days, he was actively shaping them. He thought about the next few weeks. What else could he try? What new experiences could he weave into his routine? And how could he continue to build connections that made the mundane feel magical? Before he knew it, Jake was smiling. He had a whole list of new things he wanted to try. Not because he felt like he had to, but because he was excited to see how each small change would unfold. That night, as Jake lay in bed, he reflected on the simple beauty of the routine. Sure, routines could feel repetitive at times, but they also provided stability, a foundation from which you could launch into something new. As long as he kept his mind open to growth and change, his routine would never get stale. Tomorrow would be another day to experiment. Another day to keep building. Jake looked forward to the challenge. With a final glance at his phone, no urgent emails, no missed calls, Jake turned off the light and closed his eyes. He wasn't just looking forward to what the next day would bring, he was excited to see how he would shape it. Chapter 9: The Power of Flexibility, Adapting Your Routine to Life's Surprises. It was a rainy Wednesday morning when Jake's routine got thrown out the window. He had woken up early, just like usual, made his coffee, and sat down to get a head start on his work for the day. Everything was going according to plan, until he received a message from his boss. "Boss, Jake, I need you on a call with a client ASAP. Something came up. The meeting was supposed to be tomorrow, but they need it now." Jake's heart sank. He looked at the clock. 8 a.m. He had just started his morning, and now everything was shifting. He quickly responded, agreeing to the meeting, but his mind started to race. The client meeting was important, but it was also the middle of a critical project. His morning had been carefully planned out, and now he was scrambling to make adjustments. It felt like everything was slipping through his fingers. Jake glanced at his phone again. The meeting was in 30 minutes. Well, he muttered to himself, I guess I'll have to adapt. He didn't have time to make a full breakfast, so he grabbed a protein bar, set up his laptop, and logged into the virtual meeting. His mind was already running through the tasks he would have to postpone, the emails that would be left unanswered, the work that wouldn't be finished. But something in him shifted during that call. As the meeting progressed, Jake found himself more at ease than he expected. The pressure was still there, but it wasn't as intense as it had been in the past. He had been through unexpected workdays before. He had faced crises, missed deadlines, and had things not go as planned. But this time, he had more of a sense of calm. He knew how to adjust. He knew how to keep his balance in the chaos. By the time the meeting was over, Jake was feeling surprisingly energized, despite his earlier stress. He quickly made adjustments to his day, moving his emails to the back burner, reprioritizing tasks, and accepting that some things would have to wait. He took a deep breath. Okay, I can handle this. The day had already gone off course, and instead of trying to force everything back into place, Jake decided to embrace the change. He checked in with his team, made a few quick decisions, and set up a new plan for the next few hours. Around noon, he found himself in an impromptu video call with his coworker Sam. It was supposed to be a quick check-in, but it quickly turned into a full conversation about the unpredictability of life. And how often our routines get disrupted. You ever have one of those days where nothing goes as planned, but somehow it still turns out okay? Jake asked, his voice light and relaxed. Sam chuckled. Honestly, I think that's my entire week. Things always seem to go sideways. But honestly, I'm kind of learning to go with it. I used to get stressed out when my plans fell apart, but now I've realized I can adjust and keep moving forward. Jake nodded. That's exactly it. I was feeling so on top of my game this morning, but then everything shifted. It's like my routine doesn't even matter anymore when something urgent comes up. And instead of freaking out, I just took a step back and adapted. Sam smiled. That's the secret, man. Flexibility. We can't control everything. But we can control how we respond. We can adjust, adapt, and keep moving forward. Jake thought about that. It was something he'd been realizing more and more over the past few months. Flexibility had become a key part of his new routine. It was no longer about sticking rigidly to the plan. It was about being able to flow with the day and roll with the punches when things didn't go as expected. The most successful people, Jake realized, weren't the ones with the perfect routines. They were the ones who could adapt to change without losing their focus. They didn't see unexpected events as problems. They saw them as opportunities to adjust, learn, and grow. Later that afternoon, as Jake sat at his desk, working through his now rescheduled to-do list, he felt more accomplished than he had in a while. The morning had thrown him off, but he had navigated through it with ease. He wasn't just getting through the day anymore, he was learning from it. He realized that routines were not about being unshakable, they were about building the foundation to handle whatever life threw at you. And that foundation needed to be flexible. Sometimes, the most productive thing you could do was embrace the disruption and find a way to work with it, not against it. As the day came to a close, Jake leaned back in his chair, feeling satisfied. He had moved through his day, dealt with the unexpected, and learned something important. Life was unpredictable, but his ability to adjust was what made him stronger. He grabbed his phone, thinking about the evening ahead. He'd stick to his routine of reading before bed, but he'd leave some space for spontaneity. Maybe a walk. Maybe a phone call with a friend. He didn't have to plan every second of his day. Flexibility is the key, Jake said to himself, smiling as he clicked off his laptop for the night. Tomorrow would bring new surprises, new challenges. But Jake wasn't worried. He had learned to embrace the ebb and flow of his routine, knowing that the more flexible he was, the easier it would be to move forward, no matter what came his way. Chapter 10. Routine Reinvented: How to Create the Best Version of Your Day. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light over Jake's apartment. He sat up in bed, stretching and taking a deep breath. It had been a few weeks since he had fully embraced the idea of flexibility within his routine, and the difference was clear. He no longer felt the pressure to have everything planned out to the last detail. Instead, he had learned to design a routine that could evolve with the flow of life, something that felt balanced, flexible, and purposeful. As Jake made his way to the kitchen, he felt a sense of excitement. Today wasn't just another day, it was a day where he was going to take all of the lessons he had learned and truly create the best version of his day. Step 1: Morning Clarity. Jake had always been a morning person, but his mornings used to be rushed. He would wake up late, rush through breakfast, and dive straight into work without a moment to collect his thoughts. Now, he had learned the power of starting his day with intention. This morning, he woke up at 6 a.m. sharp, but instead of diving into work, he spent the first 15 minutes just sitting by the window, enjoying the silence. The early morning light streamed through the blinds, and Jake took a moment to breathe deeply, appreciating the stillness of the world before it woke up. "I'm grateful for today," Jake said to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. It was a simple practice, but it grounded him. Then, he set the tone for his day. He wrote in his journal, "What am I grateful for today? What do I want to focus on today? What are my top 3 priorities?" These questions helped Jake clear his mind and map out his intentions for the day, without feeling overwhelmed. Instead of just checking off tasks on a to-do list, he focused on what was important to him, both professionally and personally. Step 2. A nourishing breakfast. As Jake prepared his breakfast, he didn't rush it. He made himself a hearty breakfast of oatmeal, fresh fruit, and green tea. Eating slowly and mindfully became a key part of his routine. For too long, he had treated meals as just another task, something to get through quickly. But now, he saw breakfast as an opportunity to fuel his body and mind for the day ahead. The simple act of eating with intention made a huge difference. Instead of grabbing a quick snack and heading straight to his desk, Jake savored the moment. The taste of fresh strawberries, the warmth of the oatmeal, it was all part of his new routine. Small moments like this can set the tone for the whole day, Jake mused to himself. Step 3. Morning movement. Jake had always believed in the power of exercise, but for a while, he had gotten into a routine of doing the same workout every day. Lately, however, he had realized that his body needed variety. This morning, he decided to try something different, a 30-minute yoga session. The yoga mat was rolled out in the living room, and as Jake moved through the poses, he focused not just on his body, but also on his mind. Each breath, each stretch, it was about more than just physical movement. It was about taking time to connect with himself, to reset, and to release the tension that had built up over the week. When the session ended, Jake felt both relaxed and energized, 2 things he never thought could coexist at the same time. He smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. Yoga had worked its magic. Step 4. A focused work session. Jake was back at his desk now, and his mind was clear and focused. He had his journal next to him, and he took a moment to glance at his top 3 priorities for the day. It was easy to get lost in emails and meetings, but Jake had learned to stay on track by focusing on what truly mattered. The first priority was a project he had been working on with his team, an important presentation for a client. The second priority was checking in with Danny about their shared goal of trying something new each week. And the third? Well, it was something more personal. He wanted to spend time reading a chapter from his book, a small act of self-care that had become more important over time. As Jake dove into his tasks, he didn't feel overwhelmed. He had built his day around these priorities, which meant everything else could fall into place naturally. He had learned to let go of the small distractions, the things that used to pull him in all directions. Step 5. Midday recharge. By lunchtime, Jake had made significant progress on his work, but instead of diving straight into more tasks, he allowed himself a well-deserved break. He stepped outside for a quick walk in the park near his apartment. The fresh air and movement helped clear his mind, and for a few moments, he didn't think about deadlines or responsibilities. He ran into a friend, Sarah, who happened to be walking her dog. They chatted for a while, laughing and catching up. Jake realized that these small, unplanned moments made his day feel fuller. These spontaneous interactions were part of his routine now, simple but meaningful. Step 6. Evening reflection. As the evening approached, Jake took a few minutes to reflect on his day. He sat down with a cup of herbal tea and reviewed his journal from the morning. Did he accomplish his top priorities? Were there moments he felt out of balance? What could he improve for tomorrow? Jake didn't aim for perfection. He didn't need every day to go exactly as planned. Instead, he focused on progress and learning. He asked himself, what went well today? What did I learn today? How can I improve tomorrow? With those questions in mind, Jake felt ready to wind down for the night. Step 7. Ending the day with intention. By the time Jake climbed into bed, he felt calm and content. His routine had allowed space for flexibility, creativity, and connection. It hadn't been about rigid rules or time constraints, it had been about shaping his day to fit his needs, his energy, and his goals. He turned off the lights and whispered to himself, I'm grateful for today. Tomorrow is another opportunity to grow. Jake realized that creating the best version of his day wasn't about perfection or doing everything right. It was about designing a routine that felt authentic, flexible, and full of intention. And most importantly, it was about finding joy in the journey, one small step at a time. Chapter 11. The Long-Term Power of Routines, How to Keep Evolving and Growing. It had been months since Jake had first decided to take control of his routine. In the beginning, it had all seemed like a small, experimental step, changing a few habits, trying new things, and making his day-to-day life a bit more intentional. But as time passed, Jake realized something profound. Routines weren't just about managing the daily grind. They were about building a life that could continually evolve and grow. It was a Sunday morning, and Jake was sitting at his kitchen table, sipping his coffee, looking out the window at the city below. He had started his morning just like every other weekend, slowly, intentionally. A moment of reflection before diving into the day. But today, there was a different kind of peace in the air. Something had changed. Jake had realized that the routines he had spent months building were not static, they had become part of who he was. And as he had grown, so had his routines. They had evolved with him. The evolution of his routine. When Jake first started adjusting his routine, he had been focused on small changes, things like getting up earlier, adding more breaks to his day, and exploring new hobbies. But as time passed, he began to see how deeply routines impacted his overall well-being. He wasn't just shaping his days anymore, he was shaping his life. He remembered how, at the beginning, he had felt overwhelmed by the idea of having to perfect his routine. Each day felt like an experiment, and there were moments when he thought about giving up. But over time, the little changes started to add up. The consistency of his new habits started to create momentum. His morning routine of journaling, stretching, and taking a quiet moment to reflect became a part of who he was. It gave him clarity for the rest of his day, helping him manage stress and set clear goals. As he had added more flexibility, it was like his routine became a support system that could stretch and adapt with him. He no longer saw disruptions as obstacles, he saw them as opportunities to refine and learn. The more he embraced the changes, the more he realized how adaptable his routine could be. The power of reflection. One of the most powerful tools Jake had integrated into his routine was reflection. He didn't just go through the motions anymore. He took time to assess what worked and what didn't. This wasn't just a one-time practice. Jake had learned that self-reflection needed to be a regular part of the process. Every evening, he would sit down with his journal and ask himself, "What went well today? What could I have done differently? How do I feel about my day, my progress, and my goals?" Reflecting daily had given him clarity. It helped him course correct when he needed to, and it also celebrated the wins, no matter how small. Over the months, this reflection had become a practice of self-compassion, reminding him that routines weren't about perfection. They were about progress and growth. Growth beyond the routine. But Jake also knew that routines weren't just about sticking to a set plan. He had learned that as his life evolved, so would his routines. His goals, his interests, and his energy levels would change, and that was okay. In fact, it was necessary. One thing Jake had noticed over time was that his routines had started to fuel his growth in other areas of his life. As he became more intentional about how he spent his time, whether it was through reading, learning a new skill, or building stronger connections with friends, his routines had grown with him. Each new goal or interest was folded into his day, making him feel more engaged and purposeful. For example, after a few months of sticking to his workout routine, Jake began to notice a shift in his physical energy. He felt stronger, more agile. This newfound energy made him want to take on new challenges, both at work and in his personal life. He even started planning weekend trips to explore new places, something he had never made time for before. His routines were no longer confined to just work or home. They expanded into new areas of his life, encouraging him to grow and experience more. Building momentum. Jake had also learned the value of momentum. It wasn't about doing everything perfectly every day. It was about maintaining a steady rhythm. As he continued with his routines, he saw how the small habits he had built compounded over time, creating momentum. His energy levels were higher, his productivity improved, and he felt more confident in his ability to handle whatever came his way. He realized that his routine was like a snowball. It started small, but as he consistently added new habits and practices, it grew. The positive impact on his life was undeniable. A future of possibilities. Jake sat back, looking at the list of goals he had written down earlier in the year. They had started off simple: read more books, try new activities, build better habits. But now, as he reflected on how far he had come, he could see how those goals had expanded. He wanted to build his own business. He wanted to travel more. He wanted to mentor younger people in his field. His routine was no longer just about maintaining balance or getting through the day. It was about creating the space to grow into the person he wanted to be. It was about aligning his actions with his bigger vision. Jake thought about the months ahead. There was still so much he wanted to do. His routine had given him the freedom to dream bigger, to step outside his comfort zone, and to design a life that felt fulfilling on all levels. "I'm excited to see where this goes," Jake thought, a smile spreading across his face. He knew that life wouldn't always be smooth sailing. There would be challenges, setbacks, and unexpected events. But now, Jake had a routine that could evolve with him. A routine that would continue to support him as he chased his dreams, learned new things, and faced whatever life had in store. With a renewed sense of clarity and purpose, Jake stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling city below. The world was full of possibilities, and he was ready to take on whatever came next. If you enjoyed Jake's journey of building a flexible and fulfilling routine, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What's one routine that's helped you feel more productive or balanced? We'd love to hear your story. Stay tuned for more, and remember, no matter what life throws at you, your routine can help you grow and thrive. See you in the next video.